It isn't realistic in any way to know comprehensively everything in the archive. I go through many days where I find myself leafing through literally thousands of items that people are uploading. And I usually fall into some sort of subgenre, some specific arena that one or more people focus on. And then that's all I'm thinking about. I'm drilling down into all the different specimens that folks have uploaded, finding where the gaps are, and maybe learning additional terms that'll help me find all the other pieces and examples scattered around the archive. And if I'm really lucky, I'll make a whole new collection. There's a few of those that have really stood out for me recently. I figured I'd tell you about them, because for some of them, it may be the first time you're hearing this is even a thing that exists. And if it's something that's special to you, I have some great news for you. This is Jason Scott Talks His Way Out of It, a podcast about technology, history, and getting myself out of debt. Thanks to Daniel Boyd, Jeff Atwood, and the hundreds of other supporters on Patreon and elsewhere who have been supporting me and helping me get out of debt. Some people are building up libraries of materials that they both scanned and acquired from other sources. When they come to us, it'll be thousands of items, but it's also clear some of them were already around on the internet. There's a relatively small number that they did themselves. I haven't quite figured out exactly what the mix is for this group, but a group called the International Association for the Preservation of Spiritualist and Occult Periodicals, IAPSOP, has made it quite a mission to gather up all the different documents that go into the spiritual, the unexpected, the mysterious. And while I really thought that I knew about exactly how big occult and pseudoscience literature was, I was wrong. There are thousands and thousands of periodicals that come from the 1800s all the way up to the present day that this group has collected. Like I said, I don't think they've digitized everything themselves, but they clearly found their niche, picking up all sorts of documents about hypnotism, astrology, the humors and spirits within us, scientific and definitely not quite so scientific methodologies for getting things out of the world using the right words, the right scents, the right candles, and of course, depending on your level of cynicism, the ability to sell you products to help you get along the way. In many cases, the periodicals themselves are the products. For just a small amount a month, you end up with a multi-page newspaper and magazine free to tell you about the things the medical and science communities are too afraid to tell you. Ideas and experiments that go beyond the knowledge, the pale of understanding, hearkening to questionably real, older and forgotten texts, and then, of course, selling it to you in small ads in the back. Those ads, both classified and full-page magazine ads, are where I really focus my interest. They usually promise the moon and the stars, literally working on behalf of you to gain health, happiness, wealth, and romance if you just follow these basic printed instructions. And thankfully, the IAP SOP does not stop there. They don't just give you an ad with you wondering if you can read them. They've often digitized those exact pamphlets, those mini magazines that give you those step-by-step processes to becoming the next level. For me personally, it's all about the Johnson and Smith catalogs. When they came into my life, they were purveyors of pranks, small toys, and weird versions of scientific instruments that you could buy. They felt, in other words, like the kind of places where you would be buying compasses and microscopes and litmus tests. But the Johnson catalog apparently has a history before then of the occult, of spiritual, of selling you information about scents and prayers that you could do to summon various demons and angels to your side. These are all written in the most beautiful and lurid of texts and illustrated with some truly fine black and white art. Everything is black and white because it was cheaper to print that back then, so the exquisiteness of the shadows and the cross-hatching had to come from pens and ink and artists working, no doubt anonymously or under a pseudonym, to pick up a few bucks for these places. The art is complicated, detailed. It implies a sort of world that you could become part of by joining up. And, well, spoiler alert, when you read the actual documents, they're not as enlightening as you would hope. They promise you that you have powers that you can just concentrate on and bring into reality with a wish, with a candle, with a lit match, with a book. Still, if you shave away the whole "it doesn't work" part, if you stop thinking too hard about the fact that a lot of these are self-actualization promises, and in fact there's very little of hidden or new techniques that wouldn't find themselves in the hands of a life coach, you can really enjoy these writings. We have so many of them thanks to this group, the IAP SOP at the Internet Archive. I didn't know that there was somebody who was spending literally tens of thousands of dollars to comprehensively buy all the manuals of various video game systems. The name of this person is Kirkland, and the project is called Kirkland's Manual Labor. These are thousands of manuals scanned with an eye towards being fast to load, easy to look at, and showing very few flaws, while also, as time goes on, representing every single commercial release for those video game systems. Right now on the Internet Archive, there is a collection for the Atari 2600, the Super Nintendo, and the PlayStation 2. You would think that we would have all the manuals for every system that ever existed completely up on the archive by now. And we probably do, but it's rather surprising, perhaps not so surprising when you think about how few previews there are, how low quality some of them are. 100 DPI scans done in 1998 to give to a couple close friends on a BBS or a FTP site that have simply persisted up to the modern day, belying the fact that many of these manuals were really fundamentally beautiful instructions all on their own, that they had a sense of art and design that gave context to these simple games, and that somebody like Kirkland would dedicate themselves to a years-long project to comprehensively gather all of these. It's inspiring. If you go to the Internet Archive and look for Kirkland Manual Labor, you will find both the manuals as large packs to download, as well as cases where I've split them apart and made them browsable, one by beautiful one. One of the more prominent collections on the Internet Archive that has not quite come online is the Marion Stokes Television Collection. It's over 70,000 tapes of the Philadelphia area news stations, recorded by a woman for almost 30 years, where every day she cataloged and went over all sorts of news programs, even getting friends and assistants and paid help to gather all of the tapes and put them into the many tape machines she had in her home. She had been dedicated to this for years and years, and just to let you know, I'm making it a personal project to gather some of these up and digitize them. But in the meantime, there's another beautiful collection called Input. Marion Stokes Input. This is a 1960s television program from the Philadelphia area that contains some of the most cogent, intelligent, thoughtful presentations that you could ever hope to see. It's not many tapes. It's only about 60 or 70 that we have up on the archive, and each one is about an hour. It's a level of television you just don't see anymore. These are in-depth subjects, many of them controversial, covering items like the treatment of prisoners, slave reparations, and what now feels like eternal debates, all done through the lens of an intelligently framed roundtable. They were on pneumatic tapes. We spent the time to digitize them properly, and they're all up on the Internet Archive. I've also used Whisper to put all of the captioning into them, making them even easier to listen to search through, and maybe even, if you prefer, to read and skim the transcript before deciding if you wanted to listen to it. This woman was amazing. All of the work she did, all of the things she believed in, and how the Internet Archive has been trying to keep her legacy alive for many years. It's wonderful that we have this collection, and I'm making it a personal mission to get all the rest online. Marion, Marion, Stokes, Input. And finally, I've aimed my withered, dusty hand at the multi-tens of thousands of VHS tapes at the archive. And while it's been a little bit involved splitting them up, I did want to let you know about VHS instructionals. These are over 1,000 tapes that tell you how to do something or inform you on how something is done. This was an entire genre of VHS tapes that either you lived through or maybe you didn't know existed at one point. They were sold in stores and mail order, and they promised the world in terms of education. And here's a twist for you. Many of them are not very good. Intended to be sold to unwitting customers, law enforcement agencies with an open budget, or to cover some sort of subject that was hot at the time as quickly as possible to be able to get credulous folks to buy it. They were recorded under weird conditions, in very stilted ways by non-actors reading from scripts that were right there. They have a real sense of over-prepared and simultaneously under-prepared productions. Productions where the main speaker may be reading perfectly what's being written, but honestly have no idea what they're saying. For example, a law enforcement tape on tracking down satanic activity throughout the United States. Walkthroughs of the methodologies and tools and techniques of Satanists, along with declarations that seem to come from Mars. The idea, for example, that satanic cults eat the brains of their victims to gain powers. To which I'm really asking myself, what powers? What powers do you get? Do you eat an accountant and learn how to do taxes? I don't know. But every single one of these tapes is a story of what they're trying to tell, the story of how they're being made, and the story of you looking at them with the cynicism and knowledge of how accurate or inaccurate they were. These are tapes on how to apply spray tan, or do exercises, or learn how to make a car stop properly. These are an idealistic attempt to bring the video medium into the same realm of teaching and learning that books had been beforehand. The experiment was not quite ready. Without that sort of feedback loop that we have now, where at least you can look at view counts and know that even if it's a little bit inaccurate, people will share what they see in those inaccuracies, this is a stunted experiment. This is you going to the video store and running out of ideas or being compelled by a weird cover to see what's inside. This is, in fact, a long-lost evolutionary dead end of the YouTube instructional video. It's archive.org/details/VHS instructionals. It is well worth your trip. Now, with nearly 60 million objects of all different types on the archive, there are, no doubt, thousands of potential collections, never mind individual items, that are worth your time. These are just some that leaped out at me recently. One of the great joys of working at the archive, one of the things that makes me leap out of the bed in the morning and go to sleep dreaming of the next day, is how much of a dream this has been for me. With textfiles.com, I dealt in megabytes. Here, I deal in terabytes. It is such a pleasure to be where I am. I feel really strongly that we spend way too much of our time dreaming of how things could be different, our perception of better, and maybe not enough time realizing that where we stand, surrounded by the fog and mystery of the unknown and the unknowable, it probably helps us to take a moment to appreciate where we are right now. This is Jason Scott Talks His Way Out of It, thanks to James Bekoyanu, Mark Pilgrim, Emilio Oliveira, Ernie Hershey, Michael Rubin, Craig Talbert, Dilip Reddy, Sean Kelly, Trixie the Cat, John Sturm, Eugene, Martin, Symbionce, and Anonymous, along with the hundreds of other supporters on Patreon and elsewhere who have been supporting me and helping me get out of debt. It should be obvious to people who know my voice that I've been a little under the weather for the past few episodes. That's just how it works. I get a cold, and for weeks afterwards, my voice takes forever to recover, to the point that I sometimes wonder if it's ever going to come back to full strength. It's just some strange thing about how my vocal cords work, or maybe how forceful I am using them day to day. And while I could convince myself not to work on these podcasts, to wait until later, until I've 100% healed, at this point, you've heard quite enough of me. I don't have to prove to you that my voice normally sounds better than this. And that Patreon deadline, the end of the month when they do all of the charges, is ever looming. You have to respect the circumstances of where you are, what it needs from you, and what you can provide from it. To me, that's the difference between debt and freedom.